Good morning. Hello, everyone, wherever you are coming from. It might be afternoon or evening. Welcome to this week's episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, your hostess or life coach, Maureen, as most of you know me. I'm so happy that you're here. We've had continued success, 5-star ratings, and our base, our community is building every day. And I thank all of you for that, for sharing this information with everyone who needs to hear it. I'm going to say it. So here it is. My guests are the best on the planet. And I come for me. Go ahead. I'll fight you on that if you disagree. And today I'm so excited. This gentleman is just amazing. And the privilege that I have today to interview him and speak with him is so humbling for me because I love people who've been through so much and they take all that they've been through and they give it to others and pay it forward. So today we're going to talk to Michael Hingson. He is the president and CEO of the Michael Hingson Group, Speaking with Vision. Blind since birth, Michael was born to sighted parents who raised him with a can-do attitude. He's always a high achiever, and he learned how to ride a bike and was able to do advanced math in his head. He received a master's degree in physics and a secondary teaching credential. Michael worked for high-tech companies in management until September 11th, 2001, when he and his guide dog, Roselle, escaped from the 78th floor of Tower 1 in the World Trade Center. Thrust into international limelight, Michael began to share lessons of trust, courage, and teamwork based on this experience. And as a fellow author, this is where I'm so impressed. He has a #1 New York Times bestseller, Thunderdog, and has sold over 2.5 million copies. And another book he's written, Running with Roselle, A Story for Our Youth. Sounds amazing. I want you all to go out there and get that, and we'll give information at the end of this. He is a public speaker. He's provided messages to President George Bush and has appeared on hundreds of TV and radio programs, including 5 times on Larry King. So without further ado, welcome my new friend, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. Boy, I wish I knew that guy.
I know. Isn't that funny when people read that about us? We're like, oh, hey, I'm not so bad. I'm so impressed. And of course, here on I Never Knew, what we do is we start with what I call a knee story. So it's what was that moment? And I know we have many of them in our lives, but what was like one of the most impactful moments? And it could be 9/11 or it could be before that, where you really were brought to your knees and you felt really hopeless and thinking, I don't know what's going to happen in my life and things have to change from this moment on.
Well, if I were to really pick one, um, it would be a little different than what you think. My wife became ill last year and passed away on November 12th of 2022. We were basically married 40 years at the time, but she has always been in a wheelchair, and she developed a wound that they were eventually able to get under control, but her body just started failing. And on November 7th, well, actually in late July, she went in the hospital for a month and then came home. But on November 7th, she went back in, and clearly the body wasn't keeping up with the spirit, and she passed on November 12th. And, the issue is that 40 years of marriage is a long time.
Yeah.
And 40 years of memories and 40 years of working together and learning and doing all the things that we did together. And now I do have the memories of those 40 years. And as I tell people, I don't move on from that. I move forward because she's going to always be here. And so it's the same time. If I were to say one thing that, or pick one time that really just changed everything for me personally more than anything else, it would be losing Karen.
Oh, honey, I'm so sorry for your loss. That's just devastating, isn't it? It's like losing your right arm. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, after 40 years.
right, right. 40 years of it being such this piece of you, this other part of you. It is, you really do probably feel as if you've lost a part of you, and she's not here physically, but I'm sure, do you feel her around you? Do you ever
Oh, yes.
receive? Yeah. Oh, I
And
love
and
that.
and I know that if I misbehave, I'm going to hear about it. So I stay on the straight and narrow, as it were.
I love that, and being a medium myself, I feel what you're saying, where you're gonna know that she's there, and she's always gonna find a way to communicate with you, whether it's even though they're not here physically with us, they will find a way to say, "We're still here, we're still around
Yep.
you."
Yep.
I love that so much. And of course, me being the dog lover, everything in my life, I don't know if you know, but my books are about dogs. And so, even adding to that, the fact that you have a guide dog, how was that? Tell us about 9/11. Tell us how scary that was. I mean, I could only imagine not being able to see. And I think people that were experiencing 9/11 with all the smoke, they probably got a moment of feeling the way that you did on a daily basis of not being able to see, right?
I'm not sure I would say that, because the issue is you're approaching it from being able to see,
Mhm.
and you have assumptions about what people can do and can't do when they don't see. And the problem is, for most people, they think they're experts about blindness, even though they've never tried it. The reality is that people who are blind, and I'm using a definition of blind that means basically if you've lost enough eyesight where you have to use alternatives to full eyesight to be able to function, whether it be large print or magnifiers or other things, you're still blind and
Mm,
really ought to learn the techniques of blindness. But that's the key, is the techniques of blindness. The fact of the matter is that it's what I do every day. Now, people say, well, gee, wouldn't you want to see? And my response is, well, it'd be a great adventure, but it's not the end of my life because I don't see. The reality is, eyesight is not the only game in town. And reality is, eyesight is your disability. You don't know it, but it is. And the reason it is because as soon as the power goes out, the lights go out, you're running around looking for a smartphone or a flashlight or something to get the light back on, because Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb to give you a reasonable accommodation to cover up your disability of light dependence. That's not a problem that I have. So it's all a matter of perspective. The reality is that people who don't happen to see are still just as capable and have the same right to live in the world and be considered and respected as other people. But the reality is, people who can see think if you're blind, you really can't be as equal or as good as I am. And that's just totally wrong. So the fact of the matter is, on September 11th, for me personally, there wasn't really a lot of time to be scared, because what happened was that the airplane hit the building, and then the building kind of swayed, because tall buildings like that are made to be very flexible, to be able to be buffeted in windstorms and so on, and in fact, even be hit by an airplane. There was an aircraft that hit the Empire State Building in the 1940s. It was a military aircraft that got lost in a fog bank and hit the Empire State Building. And the building didn't break off because they're made to be essentially like big springs.
mm,
So the towers on September 11th didn't collapse because the plane directly hit the building. They collapsed because the planes, I should say, hit the buildings with 26,000 pounds of jet fuel that exploded and damaged a whole lot more infrastructure in the buildings than the aircraft themselves did.
mm.
But for us, we had no idea what was going on. I don't mean me alone. No one did where we were. We were 18 floors below where the building was struck, on the other side of the building. The last time I checked, Superman and X ray vision were really and are really fictitious. So we didn't know what happened. And going down the stairs, all the people around me had no idea what happened. People always say, well, of course, you didn't know, you couldn't see it. And that's just a lot of bunk. It
Yeah.
had nothing to do with seeing it. The fact of the matter is, we didn't know. we figured out airplanes hit the building because I realized in the stairwell that I was smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel, but we didn't know. And my guide dog, Roselle, had no more idea than I. In fact, she was very focused and very calm. And the reason was because nothing was really threatening her, and she wasn't sensing anything that indicated to her that we were in instant danger.
Mm.
Yeah, she still smelled the same fumes that we did, but had no more idea of what was going on than we. And she certainly wasn't smelling smoke. And the sound of the airplane hitting the building for us was kind of more like a thump, because again, was 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. So that didn't even bother her. At the same time, me and what I did going down the stairs was I was constantly praising her, encouraging her to do a good job. And she, for her part, wasn't panicking. She was being very calm and focused and continued to do that. So we went down the stairs working together. But honestly, there wasn't a lot of time for me to be afraid because I had to focus on encouraging her. And likewise, she was doing her job, which helped me. So it's a very interdependent relationship. And it's the kind of relationship I think that people should have with their pet owners anyway. And all too often we don't. We think that they're not as equal as we are, but in a lot of ways they are. That doesn't mean that we treat them the same way. They don't need to be on the bed. They don't need to eat human food. They don't need a lot of things that people give their pets, because in reality, they love to have a pack leader, and they love humans to be their leaders who respect them, value them, and so on. Last night, actually, on 60 Minutes, I watched a segment about wolves and dogs. And what they showed was that in reality, dogs have something in their genome makeup that tends to make them much more friendly than wolves.
Mhm.
And dogs tend to be very friendly, and so they love. At the same time, dogs don't trust unconditionally, like they love unconditionally. But the difference between dogs and people is that unless a dog is incredibly traumatized by people, they're more open to trust than we are. And so
Mm.
the result is that they are open to looking for us to have a relationship with them, much more than we seem to do with our own kind.
Yes, all of that. I agree with you 1,000,000%. And that in my book, that's what I write about, is how that unconditional love that they give us. And I'll agree and disagree in some areas where yes, my dogs are on the couches and on the beds and they give people food. And I
Well,
think
that's
it's
okay. I mean, but
right. I think it's like children. I think we all have our way of raising children, and whatever works for us. And I have one dog that's been very traumatized. She's 5, and she was in a situation with domestic violence.
mm,
And even now, people come to the house. She doesn't like men with baseball hats. My husband, if he comes to hug me, she barks. But she's also so loving and so trusting with me and protective of me. It's amazing how they can heal and overcome trauma so
sure.
much easier than we do, right?
Well, dogs don't do what if, right?
Yeah.
So they don't look at it that way. We had a dog like that. We adopted a dog from Guide Dogs for the Blind. It was a geriatric career change dog that never was a guide dog, but went to live with her puppy raisers. And then after a few years, she had to go live somewhere else because they were moving to a place that wouldn't take dogs. And we're not sure what happened, but when the dog was 12, when Panama, who was a golden retriever, was 12, she was suddenly returned to guide dogs and they needed a home. And we took her. She was clearly very traumatized. She was very afraid of everything. They thought she was totally deaf because even when they dropped a Webster's dictionary next to her, she didn't respond. But what we discovered was she didn't respond because she was tuning out everything. She was that afraid of people. And it took us a long time to develop a relationship with her. But we do like to think that the last 3 years of her life, she had a much more trusting and a much more rewarding life. And she showed that to us as well. And, when I talk about being on the couch or in the bed or whatever, the issue is that it still is up to us to create the rules, right?
Yeah.
So it's if the dog is on your couch and on your bed, I would hope that you don't just let the dog go to other people's homes and be on their couches and their beds, because that's what dogs will tend to do if they don't know what the rules are.
Yeah.
They are as capable of taking advantage of the rules as we are. So it's really a matter of us setting what the rules that they're supposed to live by are, and they love that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's like children. I had a son who was ADHD, and routine was so important. And what I
Mhm.
have found with my dog Callie, the one that's been traumatized, she was, locked in a bathroom, or she was like left for a couple of weeks. And so for us, having that routine for her, and her knowing, hey, this is your place, you're allowed to be here, this is your place, you're allowed to be here, has been healing for her. So
Yeah.
she knows what to expect from us, because she had such a life of uncertainty. And so I think it's same with humans, where we've got to have that routine. So how were you able to get out of the building? And one of the things that you wrote in your questionnaire was, people tend to think guide dogs lead, and they don't. They guide us. What's the difference?
First of all, with Panama, I know exactly what you're saying. She was absolutely afraid of going in the garage. And then one day we were going to travel up to Oregon to an event at the guide dog campus up there. And I was putting luggage in the car, and all of a sudden Panama shot out the door into the garage and into the car. And she had never done that, never had expressed any interest in going to the garage. She would shake with fear. She
Oh,
went out, she got in the car, and we knew that we had crossed a major milestone with her when she did that. She was still afraid for a while, but she did it. So in the World Trade Center, I was the Mid Atlantic region sales manager of an office. And it was my job to, from my perspective, know what to do in, for example, the case of an emergency. I couldn't read signs and didn't want to read signs because, again, what if there were an emergency and there was smoke and fire and people couldn't read the signs? Now, where we were, we never had smoke and fire, but also there weren't that many signs. You went to the stairs and you went down. What some people didn't know, and because I had taken the time to learn what to do in an emergency, I knew was that because some people saw fire above us, that fire could possibly have gotten into the elevator shafts, which in fact it did. And the result of it getting into the elevator shafts is anybody in the elevators would have perished. Well, and so when we started evacuating our offices, I had a colleague, David Frank, and I told David, get our guests to the stairs, don't let them take elevators, because I knew what to do in the case of an emergency. And I had actually developed a mindset that that to me indicated that I knew what to do in any foreseeable circumstance. Of course, suddenly the building could have collapsed all around us and then it wouldn't have mattered anyway, right? But
yeah.
I knew what to do. I knew where to go and how to get there, which was my job. And it wasn't just because of an emergency that I had that knowledge. So, for example, if we had guests come to our office and we were showing them products or having a discussion, they wanted to go to lunch. I couldn't say, oh, someone's going to have to lead me because I'm blind, I don't know where to go. It's my job to know where to go as the manager and the leader of that office and say, oh, what do you want for lunch? All right, well, there's a great Chinese restaurant downstairs, or there's a great deli place downstairs. We can go wherever you'd like to go and take them there like anyone else would. Because if I couldn't do that, how would it look a couple of hours later if we were negotiating multi-million dollar contracts and I couldn't display myself in the same level of confidence as anyone else could? So it was important for me to know all of that. And I spent a lot of time traveling around the World Trade Center to learn a lot of information, actually sometimes not even using a dog but a cane, because the difference between a dog and a cane is the dog will avoid objects in its path and obstacles in its path. And some of those obstacles on the first floor of the World Trade Center were kiosks that were there all the time. And I wanted to know where they were and what they were. So I'd use a cane and I'd go find them and I'd say, what do you do here? And so I found the 9X phone kiosk or the AT&T kiosk and
Wow.
the entrance to the shoe shine store. And made friends with Peter, the shoe shine guy, and got my shoes shined there often. And anyway, but I learned all of that. So to go back to your basic question, the job of a guide dog is to walk and keep us safe while walking. It's my job to know where to go and how to get there. And so I have to give the dog commands, left, right, and so on, in order to tell the dog when to turn. And I needed to use the information that I had to know when to turn. So you might see a corridor on your left and know you have to go into that corridor to get where you want to go. I hear it. But the bottom line is it's another way of doing the same thing that you do. So ultimately, the issue is that it's my job to know and to give the dog step-by-step directions as we're walking. And then it's the dog's job to make sure that we walk safely and don't fall off a curb or off a cliff or crash into things.
I love that because you described it as an interdependent relationship, which I think just says to me we need to have interdependent relationships with everyone and everything in our lives, just like you have with your guide dog. Also, what I hear you saying is you had this, you were so great at having preparation and control, feeling you had more control rather than, oh, if I don't have my dog, I'm completely helpless. And so you took this control of, I need to know where everything is. And I coach autistic and neurodivergent people, and I always say you're just different abled. You're not disabled. So I really love, I love that. I feel you're just, we're different abled because
Well,
it's,
and I even disagree with the whole concept of different able because we're not different abled. We're as able in the same way as you are. We use different tools to get there, but that
yes.
doesn't make us different abled. And I say that because all too often we try to think we're being politically correct or trying to put ourselves when we can't really do it in other people's shoes. I'm not differently abled than you. I use different techniques, but oftentimes women use different techniques than men. Does that make them differently abled? It
Mm,
only means you're going to do the same things, but you may do it in a different way. And
yeah.
short people may do things differently than very tall people, but it doesn't make us differently abled. All it makes us is capable of using the tools that we have to accomplish the task that we need to accomplish.
Yes, I can appreciate that. Thank you. I love that. Thanks for correcting me because I think it's just like anything in life. We're trying to figure out different, our own ways of coping and maneuvering what we have to do in life. How do you think technology helps those who are born today without eyesight?
Well, or who lose their eyesight later in life.
Yeah.
Um, well, I think technologies have helped a lot. It's the same thing as I said earlier, as you went through. Thomas Edison invented the electric light bulb in 1879. How does technology help you? The technology gives you light anytime you want it on demand until it can't, right? And then your disability shows up. But it's the same sort of thing, except for us, technology has taken a lot more time to really um, become more a part of our lives with technology that gives us the tools to do what we need to do, because sighted people spent most of their time creating technologies for sighted people, and that's okay, but they leave other people out. And so we're now starting to see a greater emphasis on providing different kinds of technology. So for example, on my iPhone here, I can know whatever is being displayed on the iPhone screen. Not pictures as well yet, but that's coming. And in fact, artificial intelligence will help that. But the reality is that um, I can use the iPhone to scan a printed page and read it out loud. I can use the iPhone to verbalize whatever um, I want to hear about, like who's calling and so on. And that's because Apple put what's called a screen reader called VoiceOver in the iPhone. They did it because they were going to be sued, but they did it. And what that means is that any iPhone that's purchased today, and basically any Android phone that's purchased today, is still catching up, but still has technology in it that you can activate to make that phone accessible. So they've built them into the basic phone, which also means that they can help you as a sighted person, because if you're driving along, if you activate voiceover, you can hear who's calling when somebody calls. You don't have to look at the screen. Now, the problem is that the way voiceover gets activated also institutes some new touch techniques that you have to use rather than just tapping a screen. And I'm a little bit surprised that Apple hasn't created a new mode that would make it possible for more sighted people to use the audio features of an iPhone, like while driving, but they haven't yet. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But the reality is that it's a piece of technology that is prevalent because it's in every iPhone, it's in every operating system. And so that helps. But there are other kinds of technologies that are more specialized, technologies like something that will be able to take a file like a book and display it in Braille. That's a lot more specialized. But those kinds of technologies do exist today. And so they do help. They make it possible for more Braille to be made available. Although our educational system tends to not emphasize Braille like it should, because it says, oh, you don't need to use Braille anymore. You can just listen to books. Well, if that's the case, why do we teach sighted kids to read? You
Yeah.
can't have it both ways. The reality is Braille is an alternative to reading. It's not a substitute. And people who learn to read Braille and learn to read it well can read really as fast as sighted people can read print.
I love all of those things. That's, in fact, I was going to ask you about the Braille. And yes, I think technology is great to assist us, but I think you're right. Learning the fundamentals is really important. I once volunteered for a group who, when someone that was blind was somewhere and they needed help, they would go on to the app and then they would call the volunteers, like say if they were at the grocery store and they needed someone to read the label for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so neat because it was connection. It was human connection of us helping one another. And I really loved that. What do you think of that kind of system of helping one another?
Well, the technology is called IRA, Artificial Intelligence Remote Assistant. There's another one as well called Be My Eyes, but IRA is the more advanced one.
Mhm.
And the reality is that what it does is allows exactly what you said. A camera on your iPhone or using a pair of glasses that are connected Bluetooth wise or Wi-Fi wise to the phone can look at whatever is in front of them or around them. And the agent can describe that information to the person who happens to be blind. The issue with all of that is that today it helps a great deal. And IRA has actually the ability to look at the GPS on your phone to know where you are specifically. And the result of that is that, let's say I'm in the middle of New York City and I need to get to 44th and 6th Avenue, and I'm at, let's say 49th Street and 1st Avenue, and I'm not really sure where I am. Not only can the IRA agent look at the GPS and tell me where we are, but also give me, if I need it, directions as to how to get to where I need to go. And again, the issue is it's all about information, right? There are other ways that information could be made available to me in a more real-time process that doesn't require an agent. But in reality, that may be a lot more complicated to do than just using IRA. And so the result is that it's a great service to use to give me the information that I need, whether it's travel. I've used it to set up products in my home when I'm using something that has a touch screen or a visual display and I can't read it, but I need to push a button to get somewhere to finish setting something up. I can call an IRA agent, they can see the screen and they can tell me that. So it's about information access, which makes a lot of sense. It still doesn't mean that I'm less than they. If the world were doing it right, it would have made the products accessible right out of the box, but they don't. So the result is that IRA is a great tool to make it possible for me to have access to information that visually otherwise I wouldn't have access to.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we're getting better. And I personally have a significant hearing loss and I have hearing aids. And that's an area where definitely I think technology
Sure.
has not caught up. Insurance doesn't even pay for hearing aids because they don't see it as a significant medical thing that's necessary. And half the time I don't wear the hearing aids because all it does is amplify it, but it doesn't clarify it. And on my phone, I have to consistently put it on speaker mode, and it's embarrassing because you could be somewhere and I can't hear it if it's up to my ear. So I love that, all of these things hopefully will just get better and better as time goes by and make it just like you said, it's just we just do things differently. That's all. We just find our ways to cope with it and find better tools and techniques to get through our lives. Now, I want to know about your books. Can you tell us what Thunderdog is about? Because 2.5 million copies, I'm extremely impressed.
Well, Thunderdog was a long time in coming. What happened was that in 2002, we went to Orlando, Florida, because Roselle was being given an award as part of the Canine or the AKC Eukanuba Grand National Championship Dog Show. And I met there George Berger, who at that time was the publisher of the AKC Gazette. And George said, "You really ought to write a book, and I can introduce you to an agent." And we started talking about it, and I had not thought about it. But he introduced me to the agent that he worked with. But she wanted it to be a business book. And I said, no, this needs to be a more general kind of book.
Yeah.
And so I just kept making notes. I kept writing parts of my story and just other things that I thought needed to go into a book. And as I tell people, eventually I ended up with like 1.2 megabytes of Microsoft Word notes that sat on my computer. And then in 2010, on a Sunday afternoon, a woman called. Her name was Susie Flory, and she said, "I'm writing a book called Dog Tales. It's 17 stories about dogs, specific dogs and things they've done. And I'd like Roselle to be a part of that. Would you tell me your story?" And so I did. And then at the end, she kind of paused and she said, "You really ought to write your own book, and I would love to help you do that if you want." I was a little bit skeptical because I hadn't really had a lot of success with the professionals thus far in book writing, but I was brave and I said, "Sure, let's talk about it." Well, I sent her the notes that I had. We created a proposal and introduced it to her agent. And he had already said, "I don't want a 9/11 book." And I said, "Good, I don't either. I want a book that's going to teach people about blindness. And of course, it's going to tell my story. But by the same token, I don't want a 9/11 book as such." Anyway, he got our proposal and started bouncing off the walls. "This is great. I can sell this." And within a week, we had a contract with Thomas Nelson Publishing. So for basically the last 6 months of 2010 and the first couple months of 2011, Susie and I worked on the book and we put it together, sent it through Chip, our agent, to Thomas Nelson, and they suggested some edits. The editor that we had said, "It's not my job to change this book to make it something I want, but rather to enhance what you're doing." And he did a great job. He had a couple of good observations. So we put it all together, and then in August of 2011, it was published. And its first week out, it was on the #1 New York Times well, not the #1, but it was on the New York Times best-selling list its first week.
Love that. That is so fantastic. And so you still have Roselle? She's still with you and she's a golden retriever, correct?
I think we are now dealing with 20 years later.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
So
do you still have a guide dog
I
or
have my 8th guide dog, Alamo, who is a
a-
black lab, who's over here on the
oh.
floor, being bored with me all the time. But Roselle worked until 2007 and then retired. She had contracted a disease in 2004 called immune-mediated thrombocytopenia, IMT,
Mm.
which is a disease where the immune system attacks the platelets in the blood. And so it really thins out the blood. And the result of that is that even a bruise could cause a lot of internal bleeding. It's something that humans get and dogs get. Either it's genetic or it comes from ingesting some sort of toxin.
Mm.
And we knew that Roselle didn't have anything in her bloodline that would indicate it. So we think, at least it's my opinion, that it really came somehow from September 11th. But she worked for 3 more years and then retired and then stayed with us until June of 2011.
Wow. Wow. Oh, I
Hmm.
just love that. Do you see a difference in dog breeds as far as guide dogs? Which ones do some do better, or what do you think?
Well, some breeds do better, and every dog has a different personality. Typically, the breeds that are used, the most common is the Labrador because they're not only their temperament but their makeup. Um, they tend to be able to overall put up with more. So about 50% of all labs that start the process make it as guide dogs, and the others don't. So their career changed. They're not failures, but not every dog is cut out to be a guide dog. There's a lot that goes into it. It's extremely stressful for them. And so some do better at it than others, and they succeed and become guide dogs. Golden retrievers are sometimes used, but they have, I think, more skin issues and they're a little bit more flighty in some ways. German Shepherds were the first dogs used, but again, the issue with Shepherds is they're more herding dogs. And so, again, they tend not to do as well overall. So it's
Hmm.
a rarer Shepherd that gets to be a guide dog. And then
Oh.
a few of the schools have started using a cross between a lab and a golden retriever, which tends to be pretty successful. But the success rate, even with the most successful breed, is about 50%. And again, every dog has its own personality. So it really is more an issue of the personality and the makeup of the dog as to how well it will succeed as a guide.
Yeah, great
There,
information, great statistics. Because I would have thought the Labradors are so high energy. I have a border Aussie mix, and she's so smart and great at commands, but she is very high energy. So, does that make a difference? Is it in how energetic the dogs are?
that depends on the person they're going to. So some dogs will do better being a very high energy dog going to somebody who is a very high energy person. So again, it's also matching the dog with the personality and the personality of the dog with the person
Yeah.
as to how well it works.
How long does it take to train a guide dog?
So the typical process using what happens at the various guide dog schools like Guide Dogs for the Blind in San Rafael and the Seeing Eye in Morristown is almost from the beginning. The puppies are usually bred by the schools and they go through a series of tests after starting at about 3 or 4 weeks where the school sees how they react to different kinds of stimuli, different sounds, and so on. And then they actually go live in the homes of people who volunteer to raise the puppies, and they'll teach them some basic skills like sitting and down and so on. And the other thing that they do is they acclimatize the dogs to being out in the community. So one of the things that puppy raisers do is that they'll take the dogs with them once they're old enough to be able to do that to where they work if that's allowed or to school. College students will do it. Um, and they'll go into stores where store owners will allow them to, or some states actually have laws that say that guide dogs in training have the same access as uh, actual guide dogs do. So it depends on the state. But the bottom line is that they learn a lot of skills with the puppy raisers, and then they come back when they're about 15, 16 months old, and they start doing the actual guide training with trainers. They learn how to stop at curbs. They learn commands like forward, left, right, and so on. And they
Okay.
learn to develop that trust with the trainer that then when a student comes along and they're matched with a particular dog, they transfer that trust to the student.
Mm, I like that. I like that. So the matching part is really important because like you say, we teach them the basics, but you have to have the right dog with the right person so they get used to them and their voice commands, I'm certain, in their lifestyle, correct?
Right. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I love all of it so much. I just think dogs are, oh, we don't deserve them. They're just so amazing.
it's
My
it's a two-way street, and so again, they're great in a lot of ways, but they are dogs and we're people, and the best is when we become a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like anything in life when we have that mutual respect for one another, right?
Right.
I love it. So tell us where we can find you, where we can find your books. What do you have going on where we can see you speak? Anything that's going on. I want to know where my listeners can find Michael and even help volunteer to take in the puppies because that sounds really fun too.
Well, there are various schools around the country that train guide dogs for the blind in San Rafael, California, the Seeing Eye in Morristown, New Jersey, Guide Dog Foundation and Guiding Eyes in New York, Guide Dogs of America in California. There are a number. So people can Google that, or they can go to the International Federation of Guide Dog Schools. I think it's igdf.org. I'm not
IGDF.
sure if it's IGDF,
Okay.
um, but it's International Federation or IFGD. I'm not sure. Um, but it is an organization of guide dog schools around the world that have formed a federation, and they can go there to get the addresses of local schools, and they can learn whether the schools have programs or how they will work with people to get puppies trained. And again, it's a very serious job. So these dogs are not pets, and they're only going to stay with you for a relatively short time. Of course, a lot of puppy raisers hope their dog won't make it as a guide dog so they can get the dog back. And that happens sometimes too. It's okay.
That would be me. That would be me. I'm probably not a good candidate for for taking in a puppy. I'd end up with 10 puppies. So, but that's great that you let us know that
Keep
because that's
keep in
difficult.
mind, keep in mind what the dog's job will be. It's worth it. So you should let the dog go.
Yeah.
Um, so Thunderdog is available anywhere books are sold, whether it's a bookstore like Barnes and Noble or a local bookstore. You can get it from Amazon or wherever.
Great.
Running with Roselle was self-published. It's available through Amazon. Um, as a speaker, people can learn about me by going to www.michaelhingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com. And we also do a podcast called Unstoppable Mindset. During the pandemic, I was looking for things to do since travel cut down, and I joined a company as its chief vision officer. The company is called Accessibe, ACCESSIBE, and it's accessibe.com. And what Accessibe does is it makes products that help make websites more inclusive for persons with with a variety of disabilities. So there's an ADHD profile for Accessibe, and there's a profile for people who use screen readers. There's a profile for people who happen to have epilepsy, because you can go to a website and there are a lot of blinking cursors, and that could throw someone into a seizure. So there is a profile that Accessibe's created that if a customer uses Accessibe, then anyone with epilepsy who goes to the site that is being monitored by Accessibe and finds the Accessibe stuff on the site and sees blinking elements, they can actually stop them from blinking. So there are a lot of different techniques and technologies that Accessibe has created. And the other thing that they did is they asked if I would do a podcast, and it was to be a general podcast. And it, like this, is all about having conversations. And we need to talk about you coming on Accessibe, or on Unstoppable Mindset rather. But Accessibe asked me to do that. And we tomorrow will be publishing episode 133. We started it in August of 2001. And last year, because there was a lot of visibility and interest on LinkedIn, we started doing 2 episodes a week and putting it up on YouTube as well as in all the usual suspects for podcasts. So if people want to learn about that, they can go to michaelhingson.com/podcast. And we hope people will go. And of course, when they listen, we also would love 5-star ratings and their comments. And people are certainly welcome to go there.
I love it. You bet it. You bet. And my audience are the most compassionate, loving, and giving people. So I know they are all going to go on there. I love that. I love resources. I'm one of these that's just a sponge for resources. So just especially with neurodivergence that I have and helping others. I love that you said the ADHD resource. So yeah, I love all that. So that's the podcast, guys, is Unstoppable Mindset. I'm going to put all of these in the show notes for Michael's podcast when we put it up on both YouTube and then all the other places that we put it up. So Michael, because usually my stuff is really pretty heavy that we talk about, although your episode wasn't heavy, it was just fun and inspiring and amazing. But I always end it on a high note. And so I have little segment that I like to call What Can You Do For Me? And this is weird things, weird services that people offer. And I'll give you an example and see what you've got for me. So, because I know I spring it on people and it's hard to come up with it on the spur of the moment. So, here's what I found today. I found a service where you can hire personal paparazzi, which I think is fantastic. You know, if you're feeling a little low on your self-esteem scale, and you're like, I'm not feeling very worthy today, I'm gonna hire some paparazzi to follow me around and make me feel really special. So I thought that was interesting, but I think you're gonna appreciate this next one more than anything. It is a company called Throx, THROX. And it is a company that solves the problem of losing a sock in the dryer. And so they sell socks in threes. How fantastic is that?
That's cute.
I mean, creative, right? So what have you got for me?
So Roselle used to love to steal socks. She wouldn't chew them up. She'd steal them and hide them. So I very much can relate to Throx.
You would have used Throx with Roselle for sure.
Oh, we usually found them, so it was okay. Well, two things before answering that. One other thing that I should say is you're right. I still do a lot of traveling and speaking. And if people want a speaker, they can go to michaelhingson.com and learn about the speaking that I do. And they can email me at speaker@michaelhingson.com. And I'd love to talk with anyone who's looking for a speaker to come, whether it's telling the September 11th story, whether it's talking about trust and teamwork and leadership, emergency preparedness. Earlier this year, I happened to get a Google alert about an article somebody had written in January of this year. And the article was about a speech that I gave in Washoe County, Nevada in 2014. And he was very complimentary and talked all about the speech and what I had to say and so on. How many times does a speaker have an article written about them 9 years later?
Fantastic.
And so anyone who wants a speaker, I'd love to chat with you. So during the pandemic again, I realized that while I talked a lot about not being afraid of what was happening on September 11th, because I had developed a mindset with all my preparation, I've not really talked to anyone else about how to deal with creating that mindset for themselves. So we're writing a third book. The working title is A Guide Dog's Guide to Being Brave. And it's all about teaching people how to control their fear and not be blinded by it, as I call it. And it's all about going through my life with 8 dogs and the lessons they taught me and how we work together to deal with fear and how the dogs sometimes exhibited fear and how we had to work together to overcome that. So people can go to blindedbyfear.net, and there's an ebook that they can download, which will cover some of the topics that we'll be putting in A Guide Dog's Guide to Being Brave. So they're welcome to go there. And right now we live in a society where fear is all around us, and our politicians aren't good role models for dealing with fear. They're really a big problem. But we've got to get beyond all of that. And so I talk about things like, no matter what any politician says to us, we need to look at it for ourselves. They've not earned our trust, and we need to not just arbitrarily trust them or anyone else. People, no matter who, need to earn our trust, and we need to earn their trust. And that's a process. And so we talk about that as well. So blindedbyfear.net is a great place to go.
I love, love, love that. And I agree with you. In fact, I'm in the process of writing my third book, and it's very similar to that topic because I do believe the divisiveness in the country, the reason we argue, the reason we fight is just this fear of not agreeing or somebody's going to take something from us. And that's why the levels of depression, anxiety, and panic attacks are off the charts. So it's all founded in fear. And so I love that you're going to write something that says, hey, you don't have to live in this fear. So I think that's fantastic. So as we end this, what is the one service, weird service, or crazy fun service that you've seen offered out there that you would take advantage of or have?
A really strange service, huh?
It could even be useful or even
Yeah.
fun. I mean, we are not picky here.
Well, I will tell you, without going into a great subject, I am a firm believer in what we're seeing with artificial intelligence like Chat GPT. I think people should go try it. I think people should find ways to use it. What I also think is that our own moral compasses are going to be the best determiner of the proper ways to use it. I don't think that AI is inherently bad. I think that people will misuse things. They misuse the internet all the time. We have this thing called the dark net, right? But we
Yeah.
still have the internet around. And I think that it's very important that we do the same with AI. I think that people should go play with Chat GPT and learn what it really can do as a way to help all of us and help all of us be more successful. I would also urge people to learn more about blindness and recognize that blindness is not the problem, it's our attitudes about it. And one of the best sites to go for that is the website of the National Federation of the Blind, www.nfb.org. And they can go there and learn a lot about blindness and blind techniques. And there are a lot of things that they can do to help educate themselves and then other people about the fact that blindness isn't the problem and that we're just as capable as anyone else.
I love it. I love it. That's a really great way for us to end it. Blindness is not the problem. Our attitude toward it is, and that's fantastic. Michael, you and I are definitely aligned in our belief of how the world needs to be, and especially the beauty of what dogs bring. So, guys, I'm just honored. Thank you for that hour of your life, Michael. That is priceless, and that you gave to me, you gifted to me today, and I don't take that lightly. So I thank you so much.
Well, it was my pleasure. Glad to do it. And like I said, now we need to get you on Unstoppable Mindset.
Heck yeah, I am in. Yes, 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 yes. All right, listeners. Well, that ends our episode for today. Love you all for listening. As always, go and leave your review. Go listen to Michael's podcast. Go look him up. Go do some volunteering. Go learn about blindness. And for my books, my dog is more enlightened than I am. And my dog is my relationship coach. You can find those at Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all that fun stuff. For any life coaching, you're looking for dating coaching, relationship coaching, self-confidence, self-esteem coaching, you know where to find me, lifecoachmaureen.com. Michael and I also share our love of speaking. So I do have a media page where anyone who would like some motivational speaking for your company or your group therapy, I'd love to be a part of that. So thank you all again for being here. And don't forget to go to mydogiseverything.net where you can get healthy treats that I make in my very own kitchen that have no preservatives and no dyes and no xylitol, just healthy, good stuff, CBD for your older pets and soft chews for your seniors and toothless dogs. So we are there for you and we love those puppies. So take care of yourself, take care of each other, and most of all, please take care of those furry babies. Adopt, don't shop. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week.